Like I'm definitely drawn to a very specific kind of aesthetic, if you will. But yeah, it's nice to like live in Philadelphia where there's so much construction all the time and so much like left behind materials, either like that being cement, some of the ropes and like scrap metal, and the same thing, kind of like this like forgotten, left behind material that no one else is using or creating, that like it's fun to kind of like go like rescue and repurpose a little bit. There's obviously like some therapeutic elements in it, but like that's not also the same thing why I do it, but it is like a nice release, especially like a lot of the content like that's like more personal. It's like I feel like I have to get that out some way, and this is the most effective way of doing that. The last few years of the work that I've been making is strictly around like the death of my father, the loss of my father, processing and understanding. Like basically he went in the hospital and then within 2.5 months he was dead. Everything has its own purpose and like its own meaning in that very like that like exact moment of my life, or like a very like small, even if it's just like a snippet into like a memory of like one of the hospital visits and whatnot. So like often with a lot of the pieces I'm using a lot of like bed sheets, and even just sitting in the hospital, how many times the nurses and like in the ICU have to come through and like roll him over, change the sheets and whatnot, so you don't get like different infection with that too, like on top of the other infections that he had. So just like tying in a lot of this like physical material to my personal like experience being there and like watching this all happen. And then with these pieces too, like a lot of them are holding bricks that are like holding the sheet taut. And that was like a very direct way of kind of conveying like the emotional and mental weight of being there and how traumatic that was, and how hard on everybody, including family and friends. So there's like this pull, but just kind of this like carrying around this weight, and also with that the same brick too, like he died of cancer, and like they found like a very large like mass in his stomach, and no one knew that that even existed. But it's also kind of like just signifying like this like brick of like him carrying this around, not knowing, and that was ended up being like the demise of him. The weight of the brick is like a very direct. There's no like hidden messages behind that, where it's like, yes, like this thing holds this weight, it's taut, it's like tied up. The only way we could communicate with him was through pen and paper. He had the breathing tubes in, and that was really difficult because then he was on a lot of medications and couldn't talk, and he didn't have like full mobility, so he wasn't even really able to write very clearly. Using those sheets that were like the only way that we would be able to communicate, and taking those and often like projecting some of the sayings on it. It can be like confusing because, like I said, a lot of it is like a little shifty and doesn't, like the words don't really line up. That's because he was in and out of sedation often. Instead of trying to like edit that and make it look like it's like a very like easy to read thing, you know, like I'm like trying to like still tell the story and like stay true to that, and offer a lot of like evidence that what like I went through there, and hopefully like transferring some of that to the viewer, going back to when I was like under 10, didn't understand like how much of a connection I actually had until I was a little bit older, and then kind of was like fall in love to understand that it's like not something that I still will ever be able to stop doing.